Hello there. In my hand, I'm holding a book. The name of the book is My Fun with Learning. There are all kinds of classic tales in this book, and the one I'd like to read for you today is called The Elephant's Child. The Elephant's Child is one of Rudyard Kipling's stories, a just so story. And of course, Kipling was one of the great writers of England, and a lot of his stories take place from India, because that's where he spent a lot of his youth, and his memories are there. So I'm going to read just the snippet here. I'm actually going to end up reading probably the whole story, but these stories are shorter. It's called A Just So Story, The Elephant's Child by Rudyard Kipling. So let's take a look in the book. So there we have it, The Elephant's Child by Rudyard Kipling. In the high and far-off times of the elephant, our best beloved had no trunk. He had only a blackish, bulgy nose as big as a boot, that he could wriggle about from side to side, but he couldn't pick up things with it. But there was one elephant, a new elephant, an elephant's child, who was full of satiable curiosity, and that means he asked ever so many questions. And he lived in Africa, and he filled all Africa with his insatiable curiosities. Notice the apostrophe in the word. Let's say it really means insatiable. He asked for a tall aunt, the ostrich, why her tail feathers grew just so, and tall aunt, the ostrich, spanked him with her hard claw. He asked his tall uncle, the giraffe, what made his skin spotty, and his tall uncle, the giraffe, spanked him with his hard hoof. And still, he was just full of satiable curiosity. He asked his broad aunt, the hippopotamus, why her eyes were red. And his broad aunt, the hippopotamus, spanked him with her broad hoof. And he asked his hairy uncle, the baboon, why melons tasted just so, and his hairy uncle, the baboon, spanked him with his hairy paw. And still, he was full of satiable curiosity. He asked questions about everything that he saw, or heard, or felt, or smelled, or touched, and all his uncles and his aunts spanked him. And still, he was full of satiable curiosity. One fine morning, in the middle of the procession of the equinoxes, this satiable elephant's child asked a new, fine question that he had never asked before. He asked, what does the crocodile have for dinner? Then everybody said, hush, in a loud and dreadful tone, and they spanked him immediately and directly without stopping for a long time. By and by, when he was finished, he came upon a colocolo bird sitting in the middle of a wait-a-bit thorn bush, and he said, my father has spanked me, and my mother has spanked me. All my aunts and uncles have spanked me for my satiable curiosity, and I still want to know what the crocodile has for dinner. The colocolo bird, as a tongue twister, said with a mournful cry, go to the banks of the great, gray-green, greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, and find out. That very next morning, when there was nothing left of the equinoxes because the procession had proceeded according to precedent, this satiable elephant's child took 100 pounds of bananas, the little short red kind, and 100 pounds of sugarcane, the long purple kind, and 17 melons, the greeny, crackly kind, and said to all her dear families, goodbye. I am going to the great, gray-green, greasy Limpopo River. all set about with fever trees to find out what the crocodile has for dinner. And they all spanked him once more for luck, though he asked them most politely to stop and look. Then he went away, a little warm, but not at all astonished, eating melons and throwing the third rind out because he could not pick it up. He went from Grahamstown to Kimberley, and from Kimberley to Kahama's country, and from Kahama's country he went east by north, eating melons all the time, till at last he came to the banks of the great grey-green, greasy Limpopo River, all set about with fever trees, precisely as Kolokolo Bird had said. Now you must know and understand, O best beloved, that till that very week, and day and hour and minute, this satiable elephant's child had never seen a crocodile and did not know what one was to look like. It was all his satiable curiosity. The first thing he found was a bi-colored python rock snake, and it curled round a rock. "Excuse me," said the elephant's child most politely, "but have you seen such a thing as a crocodile in these promiscuous parts?" "Have I seen a crocodile?" said the bi-colored python rock snake in a voice of dreadful scorn. "What will you ask me next?" "Excuse me," said the elephant's child, "but could you kindly tell me what he has for dinner?" Then the bi-colored python rock snake uncoiled himself very carefully and quickly from the rock, and he spanked the elephant's child with his scalesome, flailsome tail. "Whew! That is odd," said the elephant's child, "because my father and my mother and my uncle and my aunt, not to mention the other aunt, the hippopotamus, and my other uncle, the baboon, have all spanked me for my insatiable curiosity, and I suppose this is the same thing." "Yes, I suppose." Next, guess who he came upon? Dun, 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 dun. Uh-oh. He said goodbye to the bi-colored python rock snake, and he quickly came. And guess what? This time it really was the crocodile. Oh, best beloved. The crocodile winked one eye like this. "Excuse me," said the elephant's child, "but do you happen to have seen a crocodile in these promiscuous parts?" Then the crocodile winked the other eye and lifted half his tail out of the mud, and the elephant's child stepped back most politely because he did not wish to be spanked again. "Come hither, little one," said the crocodile. "Why do you ask such things?" "Excuse me," said the elephant's child most politely, "but my father has spanked me, my mother has spanked me, not to mention my tall aunt, the ostrich, and my tall uncle, the giraffe, who kicked ever so hard, as well as my broad aunt, the hippopotamus, and my hairy uncle, the baboon, and including the bi-colored python rock snake with the scalesome, flailsome tail just up the bank, who spanked harder than any of them, and so, if it's quite all the same to you, I don't want to be spanked any more." "Come hither, little one," said the crocodile, "for I am the crocodile." And he wept crocodile tears to show it was quite true. Then the crocodile's child grew all breathless and panted and kneeled down on the bank and said, "You are the very person I have been looking for all these long days. Will you please tell me what you have for dinner?" So, please, there he is. He's been asking and looking all this time. "Come hither, little one," said the crocodile in a whisper. Then the elephant's child pushed his head down close to the crocodile's musky, tusky mouth, and the crocodile caught him by his nose, which, up to that very week, day, hour, and minute, had been no bigger than a boot, though much more useful. "I think," said the crocodile, and he said it between his teeth like this, "I think today I will begin with elephant's child." Oh, at the same time, oh, best beloved, the elephant's child was much annoyed, and he said, speaking through his nose like this, let go, you are hurting me." Then the bicolored python rock snake scuffled down. There he is. "My young friend, if you do not now, immediately and instantly, pull as hard as ever you can, it is my opinion that your acquaintance in the large patterned leather ulster," and by this he meant the crocodile, "will jerk you into yonder limpid stream before you can say Jack Robinson." This is the way the bicolored python rock snake always talked. Then the elephant's child sat back at his little haunches, pulled and pulled and pulled, and his nose began to stretch. And it stretched longer and longer, and the more the crocodile pulled, the longer his nose became. It kept stretching. The elephant's child spread all four legs and pulled and pulled and pulled, and his nose kept on stretching. And the crocodile threshed his tail like an oar, and he pulled and he pulled and he pulled, and at each pull, the elephant's child's nose grew longer and longer, and it hurt him. It hurt him. Then the bicolored python rock snake came down from the bank and knotted himself in a double clove hitch round the elephant's child's hind legs and said, "Rash and inexperienced traveler, we will now seriously devote ourselves to a little high tension because it will do not. It is my impression that yonder self-propelling man of war with the armor-plated upper deck," and by this, oh best beloved, he meant the crocodile, "will permanently vitiate your future career." That is the way all bicolored python rock snakes always talk, using big words. Oh, but guess what? Guess what? He pulled and he pulled, and the elephant's child pulled, and you know what happened. His nose got bigger and bigger, and the crocodile at last let go of the elephant child's nose. With a plop that you could hear all up and down the Limpopo, then the elephant's child sat down most hard and sudden, but first he was careful to say thank you to the bicolored python rock snake, and next he was kind to his poor pulled nose and wrapped it all up in his cool banana leaves and hung it in the great gray green greasy Limpopo to cool. That is to say, he wrapped it up in the leaves because it hurt so, and then he placed it in the water to cool off, to feel better. "What are you doing that for?" said the bicolored python rock snake. "Excuse me," said the elephant's child, "but my nose is badly out of shape, and I'm waiting for it to shrink." "Then you'll have to wait a long time," said the bicolored python rock snake. "Some people do not know what is good for them. The elephant's child sat there for 3 days waiting for his nose to shrink, but it never grew any shorter. And besides, it made him squint, for, oh, best beloved, you will see and understand that the crocodile had pulled it out into a really, truly trunk, same as all elephants have today. At the end of the 3rd day, a fly came and stung him on the shoulder. And before he knew what he was doing, he lifted up his trunk and hit that fly dead with the end of it. "Vantage number 1, said the bicolored python rock snake. "You couldn't have done That with the mere smear nose. Try and eat a little now. And there he is, conversing with him. Before he thought what he was doing, the elephant's child put out his trunk and plucked a large bundle of grass, dusted it clean against the forelegs, and stuffed it into his own mouth. Vantage number 2, said the bicolored python rock snake. You couldn't have done that with your old nose you had before. Don't think the sun is very hot here. It is, said the elephant's child, and before he thought what he was doing, he scooped up a scoop of mud from the banks of the great gray-green greasy Limpopo and slapped it on his head, where it made a cool, sloopy, sloshy mud cap, all trickly behind his ears. Vantage number 3, said the bicolored python rock snake. You couldn't have done that with your mere smear nose. Now, how do you feel about being spanked again? Excuse me, said the elephant's child, but I should not like it at all. Excuse me, I should not like it. How would you like to be spanked, somebody? Said the bicolored python rock snake. I should like it very much indeed, said the elephant's child. Well, said the bicolored python rock snake, you will find that new nose of yours very useful to spank people with. Thank you, said the elephant's child. I'll remember that. And now I think I'll go home to all my dear families and try. He's going to try out his nose. So he goes back to his family across Africa, frisking and whisking his trunk. When he wanted fruit to eat, he pulled fruit down from a tree instead of waiting for it to fall off as he used to do. When he wanted grass to be plucked from the ground instead of going on his knees as he used to. When the flies bit him, he broke off the branch of the tree and used it as a fly whisk. So here he has it. He doesn't have to bend down on the grass anymore. He doesn't have to get flies the old way. He can simply use his trunk. And he made himself a new cool, slushy, squishy mud cap whenever the sun was hot. He could take the mud and he could swish it and slosh it and put it on his head to cool. When he felt lonely walking through Africa, he sang to himself down his trunk, and the noise was louder than several brass bands. He went especially out of his way to find a broad hippopotamus. She was no relation of his, and he spanked her very hard to make sure that the bicolored python rock snake had spoken the truth about his new trunk. The rest of the time, he picked up the melon rinds that he had dropped on his way to the Limpopo, where he was a tidy pachyderm. And a pachyderm, of course, is the family of animals to which an elephant belongs. One dark evening, he came back to all his dear families, and he coiled up his trunk and said, "How do you do?" They were very glad to see him and immediately said, "Come here and be spanked now for your satiable curiosity." "Pooh," said the elephant's child. "I don't think you peoples know anything about spanking, but I do, and I'll show you." And what did he do? He began using his trunk, and he knocked two of his brothers head over heels. "Oh, bananas," they said. "Where did you learn that trick, and what have you done to your nose?" "I got a new one from the crocodile on the banks of the great gray-green, greasy Limpopo River," said the elephant's child. "I asked him what he had for dinner, and he gave me this to keep." "It looks very ugly," said the hairy uncle, the baboon. "It does," said the elephant's child, "but it's very useful." And he picked up his hairy uncle, the baboon, by his one hairy leg and hove him into a hornet's nest. Then the bad elephant's child spanked all his dear families for a long time, till they were very warm and greatly astonished. he pulled out his tall ostrich on tail feathers, and he caught his tall uncle, the giraffe, by the hind leg and dragged him through the thorn bush. And he goes on and on. Then he went to the hippopotamus and blew bubbles into her ears when she was sleeping in the water after meals. But he never let anyone touch the colocolo bird. At last, things grew so exciting that his dear families went off, one by one, in a hurry to the banks of the great gray-green, greasy Limpopo River, all set about with beaver trees to burrow new noses from the crocodile. When they came to the back, nobody spanked anybody anymore. And ever since that day, oh best beloved, all the elephants that you will ever see, besides all those that you won't, have trunks precisely like the trunk of the satiable elephant's child. I hope you enjoyed this story. This may be a silly story, but it's called a just so story. And it has some lessons of life as well, doesn't it? But a fun story nonetheless. Well, if you liked it, go ahead and click like and learn something new every day.